Hi, everyone. I think this is the majority of us. We have maybe one or two people trickling in. So I will go ahead and share the agenda and all of the other materials that I sent out via email. So that includes the agenda, the archives spreadsheet that we've been working on, and I'll also share some of the BPS stuff that they sent, and I'll do that on the email. So it'd be great. Like, let me know if you click on one of these things and you don't have access to it. It's a lot. Sorry. And then one more thing that I feel like I'm forgetting. The agenda. Oh yeah, then the traveling trunks thing. All right. Okay. Okay, great. And I uploaded the meeting minutes. I don't know if you guys were able to see them or read them. I put them on the website and also on the Google Calendar. Um, if you guys were had any comments about it, let me know. If not, we'll just make a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Okay, great. A second.
Second.
All right. And so then I will let Joe and Bob take it away to explain what we are going to be doing today. And then I'll share my screen as you guys talk.
Sure. So we were thinking of doing a work session today. I felt like that was an effective use of our time last time. And given that we can't do a lot of this off these meetings yet, it felt like that would be a good way to use this time. So one of the things that we talked about when Hennessy, Bob, and I met to go over the agenda for this was that there seemed to be a lot of overlap between the BPL's work with uh, the kind of clearinghouse, which I know we're not calling it that, the database of resources, the curriculum standards, and even the map that we had been discussing, connecting schools to nearby resources like museums and archives. So it sounded like what could be really helpful is to essentially combine everything into one big concept with two different kind of entry points, or really parallel entry points, really. One being a map for place-based learning and resource-based learning, and the other being the BPL web page for more of a directed research um, work. Um, so what we were proposing to do today was to use which one is it? It is the archives TAC-subcom spreadsheet thing, which many of you, if not all of you, are already in. You will recognize it by the column E, which is very colorful. And to populate that spreadsheet with curricula standards from the BPS, who shared that with us last time we met them, which was, I think, that wasn't last meeting. Was that last meeting or the meeting? It doesn't really matter. Uh, last meeting, wow. Um, so I think, do we have a link to we have a link to the DBQ, but
Yes.
but that's not the same as the pacing guide.
No, I can. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Let me.
I have a link to the pacing
Okay,
guide. I can get it right now.
great.
Um, Anyone with the link? This should work. Please let me know if it doesn't. So what the concept would be to essentially use the pacing guide to connect various resources to the pacing guide so that those can then be categorized in a way that we would have archives, museums, people categorized somewhat through the pacing guide that would also be tied to location and also to research topic. And before we kind of jump into that, open question to the team. Does that sound like a good idea? It's kind of what buy-in before we start doing it.
Do we know if that would be helpful for BPS?
It sounds like they're really interested in making connections, but they don't necessarily know what our resources or our kind of, general leanings are. And I know if some of the archives are so broad that it's going to cover all of these, but not all of them are. And so in that case, the BPS might just have a slightly more directed guidance of like if we wanted to do sixth grade, they could potentially click a drop down or click a button and see all of these archives that really tie into, world geography and ancient civilizations, for example, for sixth grade. That may not be something that the Boston City Archives, for example, covers very much since it's a Boston archive, not a world geology or geography. So that kind of thing I think could be helpful. But I don't know. What do y'all think?
I mean, I just want to add, Caitlin, who came to speak with us last time, said that this would be helpful if, we're sorted by what would be appropriate for grades, and by their curriculum, because um, teachers obviously don't have the capacity to do this research themselves, and they found that if they had something like this on hand that was easy to break down by grade and by topic, then that would be really helpful for teachers to not have to do so much of that work. But, you know,
I
I think
agree it would be helpful, but this is an entity that absorbs about a third of the city's budget. And why is this group now the one doing it? I know we're the ones who know the archives and all. I'm just being a little frustrated because thinking, yeah, it would be really useful for teachers to have this, but are we actually the best group to be doing what is actually a lot of work?
I think I would also agree with Bob about, so I think in my experience, teachers want, in my experience, teachers want a very, very highly curated set of 3 to 5 resources that they can use like for their specific classroom, curated for them. And then the other thing that they want, sorry, lost it. And the other thing that they want is somebody to talk to about the various different things that they're interested in their particular classroom. So I think, so if we're going to talk about various different sort of broad topics like international geography, well, I mean, I could say, yes, we focus on international geography because we have collections related to the Chinese Progressive Association. And so, in immigration and those sorts of things. So I I just wonder whether or not, and then also, sorry, my daughter's calling me to go get her. So I just wonder whether or not that is the best use of our time because we're not teachers. And so it's hard for us to know specifically what they want. And so the Digital Public Library of America at some point created resource guides for teachers. And so maybe pointing them, so, if you wanted to know about, I don't know, shoemaking in Massachusetts, here are these 6 resources and here is how you can, but they were made by teachers, right? So the teachers themselves knew what they were looking for and what the Massachusetts standards were.
That's really helpful, Jordana. Tori?
Um, yeah, I also agree with Jordana and Bob. For the reasons that they've stated, and also, the more complex this database becomes, like there is a horizon at which point it becomes daunting for a user. And I worry not just about how much time we wind up devoting to this project, but also just how it feels on the user end. Um, and similarly, the more we curate it to a very specific population, like teachers, the more it becomes, abstract or daunting or just feel less approachable to a member of the general public.
Okay. I see Jordana's gone off camera, but I wanted to have a follow-up question for the 3 to 5 resources, and maybe someone else can answer that. Can we define resources just a little bit better, just so I can fully understand that point? Because I think if that's the case, then we really need to move in a different direction for the planned agenda. Is that DBQs? Is that um, curriculum developed by or for teachers? Or is it more um, abstract than that?
I want to add to that, Joe, and ask, would it be a better use of our time to look at the traveling trunks and maybe see how institutionally we can offer traveling trunks with whatever institutions we're partnered with? Um, that might be,
I think that makes sense because each institution knows what they have and they kind of see this as something, a model that they then could say, yeah, we have things on this or things on this. I know the MHS has great stuff and they've had teachers do actually curriculum on various things like the Boston Massacre or Bunker Hill and so on. I don't know if that's what Kid was going to talk about, but I see he's just unmuted himself.
I was going to say that I do feel a little bit like I might be overstepping my bounds if I tread onto what our education team is already responsible for and is already working on with both curriculum design and also any potential plans they have for the future. So I would consult with them, but I'm not sure that I can necessarily speak for the institution since there's another department here that deals with all of this.
Thanks.
I will also say I do think that it would be a good use of our time to collectively take a look at the spreadsheet as it stands right now. Like I have some questions and feedback for the group, so I don't want us to completely shift gears. But you know, I would be interested to hear other folks' thoughts about the kinds of resources that teachers find most useful. I don't want to speak for anyone, you know, in my past experience when working in like museum education um and special collections. You know, I think one of the things that Jordana may have been referring to are like primary source sets, which DPLA has cultivated, and again, those are predominantly developed by teachers. Um, and but I don't know exactly what else she may have been referring to.
So getting the general consensus seems to be that there's a lot out there already, and we don't necessarily need to like be creating and or even necessarily organizing because there seems to be quite a lot of network and structure for that to happen. What I do want to add that I think if not our organization or us as a group can, I don't think we should be doing it, but I think we need to find ways to share out upward that this needs to happen. That my concern with some of these resources is that things like primary source sets tend to be primary document sets. Or if we're lucky, primary documents and photos and recordings, and then it doesn't quite get to objects and things like that, or even oral history or other ways of knowing. And I feel like that's something that I think would be good for we as a group to be able to um, something. I don't know what the verb is there, but get beyond this kind of really narrow approach to historic records to be more inclusive of things that do not kind of fit that, you know, the tan parchment with the hard to read cursive and go into Zines and go into oral histories and go into traditional leaders and things like that. I don't know how that would work, but I feel like that's something that is missing in a lot of existing resources that are out there. And I'm also making a bit of an assumption because I'm not an educational specialist, and I'm sure there are people working in that direction. But I feel like that is something that is inevitably needing additional work. Um, I don't think we're going to do that today or really as a group, but just wanted to flag that.
yeah. I think that's great. And I might add, you know, as we consider like what it is that we have the capacity to do, that might start to shape the conversation of what we end up doing and end up recommending. And so it might be more fruitful for us to, you know, look at the kind of work that we have wanted to do and have been talking about and identify some themes that, you know, are recurring in that work and see if we can maybe pull out recommendations for multiple, groups, multiple organizations. So it's like, here's some recommendations that we have for BPS if they want to do more oral histories, more, uh, whatever, or, here's some recommendations we have for partners who might want to fund school buses. And so maybe we're more of a think tank on what like recommendations we have for specific things when it comes to, you know, archives and curricula and whatever else that might entail, you know.
So I think we've got three new topics to discuss. The traveling trunks. I do want to go back to what Dory mentioned about the spreadsheet and questions and discussions there, and recommendations for potential themes. That seems like fruitful work as far as I'm concerned. Does everyone, do we want to maybe go back to the spreadsheet since that's the kind of closest to what we started on? And see, Dory, if you've got feedback, questions, or concerns.
I
you
sure
can-
do. Thank you so much. I spent, oh, sorry, did I speak over you, Hennessy?
No, I'm just gonna share my screen so you can talk you can point as you talk.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So a couple of weeks ago, I will say, full disclosure, I'm recovering from COVID, so if I forget what I'm talking about midstream, just bear with. But a couple of weeks ago, I spent a good chunk of time just kind of parsing through and taking some notes. So I might hop around a little bit. Um, you know, on just taking a look at the archives tab, if you go down to rows 81 through 86, there's some interesting additions in the probate records, but they're really scattershot and there's like no metadata. So this is a very uh, fine point, but I wrote in the notes and comments, like I wonder if it might be best listed just collectively under the judicial archives with the link attached. But I didn't want to like go and make any direct edits that would have been disruptive. Um, but ultimately, like these things are a little all over the place, and I just want to make sure that like the information that we're compiling and making accessible is actually accessible. Another point I want to make, and I think this is something like I went through and I did a little bit of data cleanup, um, you know, marking collection types. There are some things that are there are some collections that are more than one type of thing. So I did go ahead and make it so that you could apply multiple tags. And I also just want to highlight for anyone who might be editing this, in the contacts column, I think whenever possible, my recommendation would be that we use the kind of liaison email, like archive@rcab.org, as opposed to an individual's email, because those are likelier to change. Um, and whenever possible, you could also use the many pages, many web pages have like a contact us page or form. So I would recommend either the liaison email or contact form before using an individual's contact info or even phone number. Again, just because those are likelier to change at a faster clip. I also had a question that, there are a few resources listed that no longer have working websites. My recommendation would be to not include those things. Again, I didn't want to go right ahead and delete things. But um, but again, we don't want to share resources that are no longer accessible or usable to people. So I marked whenever I came upon a website, I just wrote that in the comments. I also had a question for the hive mind, which is, should we include trails and create like a collection type for that, like the Immigrant History Trail, the Freedom Trail, et cetera, because there are a number of those. I don't know that I feel strongly, but it was a question that I pondered. And then my final thought, since I'm just throwing all of the spaghetti at the wall, under themes and topics, under that tab, I'm confused by the townwide communities column, which column C. I have a hunch that that is maybe not going to be so useful, and that the expanding the broad topics tags into something more like subject tags may be a bit more useful, because townwide communities is abstract enough and specific enough to be confusing and potentially a problem. So those are all of the thoughts that I had jotted down, and I just didn't want to be alone with them. So now you have them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. Well, let's work right down the list. I had a question related to the probates when we were at that part. Hennessy, do you mind going back there for a second?
Oh.
So the consideration was to potentially present them all together. I know when I'm researching probates, which I wish I didn't have to do so much of, but I do. I'm using it on familysearch.org, and that link goes to all the different counties. Do you all think that our audience, which I don't think we've terribly done a good job of defining yet, but let's just say the Boston public, would be more interested in the probates as a place to go to see the books, to hear about probates, to learn, to be, or to approach it as a reference that can be used online, in which case the family search links could be very helpful. What do you all think?
Family search links.
Yeah,
Is there a way to do both? Because Family Search only goes up so far.
that's true. Yeah. That's a good point. So I guess in that case, we would have a physical address and a link to family search.
I don't know if there's another column that says you could put like note available these years available on Family Search. And it's not consistent across counties either. Like certain Suffolk only doesn't go up very far, but like the other counties, they do go up pretty far. So I think it's a good idea to consolidate them, but it's also depending on where you're looking for probate, it's going to be helpful to have them separated.
But it does sound like the general consensus is the web link is probably the most useful thing to folks to family search. I don't know amongst the non-archivist community, does family search have a presence that people are aware of? Is it something that typically people will have used before? So I think a lot of people think that they are going to need to pay to access it, like Ancestry, and don't realize it's free. And I'm not sure if folks on that first click will notice or realize that it's a free link. So anyway, that
Yeah.
doesn't really present a solution, but that's the one worry I have about family search is the learning curve.
Did
Yeah.
we include any resources that were paywalled?
Not knowingly, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think if we just, I mean, if we just, only put up things that are free, then we don't have to necessarily specify.
Mhm.
Joe, in terms of the court records, mass.gov has a whole site, how to find court records,
No.
and it includes all links to historic records as well as more current records. And it does have like the link to Family Search and Ancestry. as well as the individual county registries.
Great. Then that's ideal then.
I can put that in the chat.
What records online too.
That may be the link that I put in the notes.
So we're going to go with probate records and court records, and then folks can kind of choose their own adventure. We'll have to, there needs to be a whole page that exists somewhere on boston.gov that just explains the history of counties in Boston, because it's a nightmare if you don't know it off the top of your hand on the way in, or do a ton of research in Norfolk County, not realizing that it became Suffolk County at some point, which I have done too many times to admit.
Totally. I think though, if this is, you know, I mean, although we haven't necessarily defined our audience, what we're talking about here is, here are the friendly neighborhood archivists who can explain things to you, and you should feel free to contact them. You know, I think that most Joe Schmoes on the street or high school students or whatever aren't even going to know what probate means. And so, you know, they'll probably just scroll on by with those things unless they're already established historical researchers. And might, you know, end up clicking on like Boston Little Syria Project instead.
That's a good point. But having it all on this page will be great for us to be able to still kick people back to.
Yep.
Great. Good point.
I had a question, like follow up to what Dory was saying about the topics thing, connected to the archive tags and sorting. So, you know, I did this I think a long time ago at this point, but do you guys find that maybe themes and topics is a little bit too specific and that we might want to do more general subject tagging? Like how do we balance both of these things potentially?
I think, you know, I think that the main tab is extremely useful. You know, the archives tab as it is. Which, you know, defines institutions, has like a couple of, you know, I don't even think we need necessarily topics or themes.
Right.
And if we focus on that being in my world, we always talking about version 1 and version 2. So if we were able to sort of like put out tab 1 archives out as a resource on the BPL page, that goes a long way, even if we're not, because, you know, if we assign tags, themes, or topics to various institutions that are not our own, then they're probably all contact us and be like, well, you know, you forgot about blah, 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 or, and, you know, and the sort of like unevenness of the various different nested tags, might be difficult for people. So my suggestion is just clean it up. Include the institutional email addresses, and post it.
Okay.
But Dory's got her hand up, she knows better.
I super agree with you, Jordana. I also, you know, I think my only other thought is that we could include a line or two of like description, or even like the institution's stated mission in their own words, so that we're not trying to piece together our own language, and, you know, trust, that people will read that and understand it.
And if we have all their addresses, that would be a good way of testing whether or not they work. Can you provide one sentence on what it is that you do? Or 3, max 3.
Okay. So, sorry, no, just to get to the cleaning up of this. So we instead of like focusing on all of these little mini sheets that we have, we want to consolidate and make this first archives sheet the most robust. So we should, you know, identify if there's any missing, not topics or themes, but maybe change that to description, so that it can come directly from their website. And then I'd just ask if there's anything else that you guys think might be missing here, or not missing, but would be useful to add before we move on, Joe. Sorry.
No, 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 this is good. Just as an example,
Ooh.
for the Northeastern archives, does does the fact that there's a significant Roxbury collection there, is that captured in the mission statement or things like that? Like, is that going to be useful, or are we trying to get is our audience, how am I saying this? Are we hoping that people go here and then do kind of shotgun approach to research, or is it really more guiding people to their first step? And I think that's kind of what I want to balance, because I feel like the part that I think can be really valuable is to know that there are really important data sets about topics that people wouldn't assume based on just the name of the institution.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
and
think
how to kind of combat that.
absolutely, Joe. I think, if we have the email addresses for all of these institutions, right? Or at least some email address or some contact information, if somebody wrote me, and this is just like if I weren't on the commission and blah, 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 if somebody wrote to archives@northeastern.edu and said, we're compiling a list, a City of Boston list of archives and historical society that has public access, write a three sentence description, we would do that. Right. And
Yeah.
then it would say exactly what we would want to say about ourselves. Like, I mean, I've got like a tag that I would just sort of like spit out in the email, like Northeastern University Archives and Special Collections collects and makes available the history of underrepresented communities in Boston. Like, that's pretty much all we focus on, bloody, bloody, blah. So I think that's probably what we're looking for, right?
Mhm. So
That elevator pitch version.
should we do a blanket email to these institutions to ask for that? Is that kind of a next step on that one?
I love that idea.
If we don't hear back from folks, we can kind of try to fish for mission statements and things like that, but otherwise try to use kind of an own voice definition here. Okay, that
Yeah.
sounds like
I have a question. I remember or recall that we were working on a Google form a long while ago, or for these institutions. Would we want to use more that boilerplate email, or would we want to contact those organizations directly and ask them to fill out the form to get the most accurate information? I don't, whatever you guys think is best. It can come from the commemoration at Boston. So it's like, it's a thing. It's official.
I think,
I just, oh,
go ahead.
oh, thank you, Jordana. I just put in the
Yeah,
chat,
I just saw.
yeah, just recent experience of trying to hire roles where you're getting like 75 cover letters. It's at least difficult for me to organize that sort of thing. So if you're getting inundated, I'd suggest going with the form route, and then that way all of the data is in the same place and you can easily copy it to the spreadsheet.
Yep. Okay.
Is that form ready to go, or do we need to get that figured out? I found one form on the website, but it's definitely not the form we're talking about. So
No, because we held off on sending it out,
Yeah.
because we were still discussing what this whole project meant. I'm not sure. I remember Kayla and I were discussing it, and she might have worked on it, but I know that when we switched over to like that subject tag and like what it might look like if we do it, like it was a long while ago, but I'm not sure if she has that or not. But if not, then we can just, quickly work on a form. Or I can quickly work on a form and then send it to you guys, and you guys, or we can actually talk about the questions that we want to put on the form, and then I can send you guys what the form looks like as a final product. That way we have already addressed what should be going on the form.
I think that the form is such a good opportunity to just validate the information that we have.
Yeah.
And so just go through, column by column in a sense, and just ask people, like, what is your contact? How do you identify your collection type, and give them check boxes. Are you an archive special collections? Are you a digital resource? Are you a historic building, museum, et cetera, et cetera? And yeah, let folks self-describe and reduce, and then all we have to do is clean up.
Yeah. Okay.
The form is already done. It's been done for a few months, and I had passed it off to you, Hennessy.
Yeah.
I think at
I
this
find
point
it.
it's been so long that you would have to change what like you're asking these people. I was just going into my drive to see if I could find it because it has been so long, but it would be pretty easy to just change. You just want to make sure you're asking what you want to ask.
Yeah. If you resend it, I tried to find it on my drive and I can't. But if we could take a look at it now and go through the questions and see what needs to be removed and
We can skip some of that. And what I'm worried
yeah.
about too is having to ask for approval after the meeting, we technically still can't do. But if we all agree that the columns here are the prompts for the form, then Hennessy, I think that could give you carte blanche to go ahead
Yeah.
and just create the form from this. Is that something? I don't even know if we can vote. I don't know if we have a quorum, but can we agree to have that be the plan, to have Hennessy create a form based on the prompts of the columns, maybe except for F, and have that form go out as soon as you have a chance to do it, Hennessy, just so you're not bogged down and waiting for us to get back to an email because we have hard enough
Yeah.
time with the Google chat with the Google Forms. I mean the Doodle Forms.
Yeah, I think that's
Oh
a
yeah.
great idea.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. That works.
I agree.
Awesome. Okay. I'm still going down Dory's list because I want to make sure we get to those. Multiple tabs. Thank you for doing that. I think that's going to be critical to the success of this. Related to the tabs, is that going to be really the primary sort that people will have once they get to the BPL page that's in concept, Dory?
Think so. Especially if we're leaning away from subject tagging or subject headings. I think, all told, like the database that we present on the BPL site, it's going to be very spreadsheety, and so it's not going to be terribly complex.
Yeah. That sounds good though. I mean, honestly, looking at the spreadsheet already, it's just like this is just good for us to be able to reference because it's like, oh, I never completely forgot about them. Like this is a really good thing to just have out there as soon as we can.
Yeah.
Some of these were just statements, so I'm going to skip over them about the emails. Oh yeah, so what do we want to do about not working websites? The proposal was to eliminate a row of archive a resource if the website doesn't exist anymore or there's really no living version of the organization.
Um, I think that might be solved if enough organizations fill out the Google form and they update the link.
Mm.
Then we have the most updated information. But if they submit something and the link still doesn't work, then you might have to reconsider.
Yeah, I mean, like if you take the Boston family history, which is in row 8, as an example, it's in, I think that was the one, yeah,
This one.
yeah, it's now just a preserved website on, like, preserved by the Wayback Machine, and I don't
Yep.
think that that's, I don't think that people are going to use it. I think, people are going to look at this and just immediately see ancient website and think I can get more accurate information somewhere else. And they will probably be right. So my inclination would be to remove that resource. But again, I don't want to make an executive decision. It's not my place.
It was a great resource, and it was really too bad that they didn't maintain it. It's been down for almost 20 years, I think, but it was great when they had it up.
Yeah.
That and the Streets Project.
It looks like the other two kind of pretty big ones that are defunct are West Roxbury and Roslindale Historical Societies. Which I know in the case of West Roxbury is basically one person. But I don't know what Roslindale is. what I don't necessarily want to eliminate those because I feel like those are things that could come back, but also really should exist. But until they don't do exist, maybe we don't list them.
I think you remove them. From my understanding, there's a lot of turnover at the Rosendale Historical, and it's unclear who is in charge. Actually, I think they're having a hard time getting control of the website back. So I don't know what the internal politics are, but yeah, that's what's happening in Rossi.
I think that in this case, then what I would want to make sure we do have are things like the neighborhood libraries because I don't know if West Roxbury Library is in here because I know that's where the West Roxbury Historical Society stores their stuff. So having the library itself as as a reference place would actually be pretty useful. But we haven't included libraries like the neighborhood kind of BPL branches explicitly in this list, have we?
Mm.
No, we haven't.
Should we do that?
It's a good question.
I
Well,
that's a
maybe Dory, if you ask who's got in the BP, like within a BPL email, like who's got historical collections?
Yes, I have, and you're reminding me because someone did an inventory, but that was 20 years ago. So I can do some info gathering.
So we'll put a pin in that for now then, because there's got to be others libraries that have little closets of stuff too.
Yeah,
Cool.
was what my understanding, and Dory can tell me if this is right. You know, a lot of them have little collections that are, may or may not be special collections, but may include like yearbooks and that kind of thing. But if they don't want to be fielding questions from everybody and their brother, maybe they wouldn't want to be included.
That is correct, and that is a very good point. So TBD, I'll come back with an answer
Are
next time
the
we chat.
branch librarians typically prepared for kind of neighborhood questions like that?
I mean, they definitely can. They do provide access to the local history collections when they have them. I think, but they use that's each branch is so very different from every other branch. So there's no one single answer to that question.
That's actually really helpful to know that it is really branch by branch in that case.
Yeah.
And so if we go to the main BPL page and type in information, it's not going to pop up that there's a specific collection about this topic at the Roxbury branch or anything. That's all by individual locate. Okay. Did not know that.
I just
And
wanted to like throw in a plug that I recall from previous meetings that we were trying to keep this kind of like non-traditional and including people that have stories, not just records. And I don't know if just because they don't have like a website or a phone number would be a good indicator to leave them off. Like we could put a note, for example, the Rosendale Historical Society, like those records exist somewhere, but we don't have to know where they are. We could just say it exists, contact
They
BPL.
are
Like,
they are at the
you know what
BPL.
yeah, so you could say contact the BPL Rosendale branch if we know that. I think we're supposed to be like information, like just a clearinghouse, like we were talking about, not necessarily having all the correct information. And it's not a static database. It can always be updated. So we could add like a notes column or a comments column if we know something exists, but maybe we just don't have the correct contact information.
Okay, so for Rosendale and West Roxbury, we could just add to see the local library basically, or name the branch, but mention those. Okay, great. The next one that was brought up was trails, and actually I have a question for Hennessy on that one. Does the trails subcommittee have their own list already?
Of trails.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
no. We are currently discussing what would it mean if new trails are created? How are those being vetted? What research is being done? Yeah. So there are technically no official lists. I always consolidate it. and include it here as a resource. I know that that's something that we were thinking of way back when of doing anyway. Um, so that it's an option.
I would love to include trails, even if we just included the main trails, which I would say is women's history, African American history, Freedom Trail, and immigrant history.
Mhm.
I know that there was talk about a Black History Trail based in
Yes,
Roxbury, but I don't know where that one left off.
I'm not sure. I'd have to check. I know that there's a Black Heritage Trail in North End that's really shaping up. They received funding and everything.
Yep.
So there's we're having conversations about how we do that inquiry in that subcommittee. And it's a good conversation, but we need to do the inquiry. Because I'm not sure. We have the ones that are already existing and institutional. We have the ones that were created out of Boston 100 that still exist. And we also have some neighborhood potential, that people are already working on that we'd love to capture. So,
Could we decide just to include, for now, just the established long-standing ones?
It's a great idea. Can we rattle them off real fast again? We've got Freedom Trail. I'm gonna add it to the bottom. I'm gonna
Yeah,
see.
freedom, immigrant history, women's history,
Women's freedom.
African American history in Beacon Hill. Those are the four that I know have been around for a really long time, like official trails. I also know that there's like a Poe Trail, but
Yes.
I don't know if we just, so the way that these things work oftentimes is you put up a resource and everybody's like
Mhm.
upset that they're not included.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And
there's
so,
an,
but I think, the reaction is, well, great, we'll include you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, there's an,
You fill out this form and we'll be
yeah,
happy to
yeah.
include you.
Yeah.
So, sorry, we weren't aware, right? Is
yeah.
a perfectly acceptable. So it is to some degree a way of including.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
there's an innovation trail
Yeah, I
too
was gonna
that's
say,
in,
yeah.
and there was a literary trail at once upon a time. I know there's a
yeah,
booklet
that's
about it.
the Poe Trail.
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of these are the Boston 200 trails. I can just look at the book and see which ones are
yeah,
still
yeah.
being managed in some capacity and which ones aren't.
Yeah, the idea of presenting stuff so that we got feedback was something
Mhm.
that we as a
Yeah.
subcommittee tried to do a couple of full commission
Mhm.
meetings back, and that got shut down pretty quickly, unfortunately. But I actually really like it as a technique. But I
Mhm.
understand why
Yeah.
the full committee maybe didn't want to necessarily embrace releasing
Mhm.
big list of things that were incomplete.
Yeah,
Okay, great, but we will.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to actually get something done.
yeah.
All right. And then the last thing that was on the list from Dory was about combining the columns of C and D in the themes and topics. And I think that we're not necessarily going to do anything with themes and topics yet, but I think that those combination of C and D into some more together lumped together concept, I think makes more sense, just so that we don't end up offending folks. Yeah, that one I struggled with when we started writing those, because I just felt like there is organizations that specifically will have an arts archive like the Arts Commission for the city of Boston, but it's not just for certain groups of people it can be really complex, but
Yeah.
the intersectional version of all of this is the hardest part. But that's why I'm really glad that E on the main page at least has more than one drop down
Yeah.
now. So
Yeah.
thank you, Dory, again for
Yeah.
that.
And another thing that wasn't flagged here, but was flagged in general by events, exhibits, and trails was that time periods are controversial. Like if you look the Reconstruction era, some people disagree wildly on when it ended. And so I think this was Dr. Trent's recommendation, and it was just to put 50-year time periods with no names, just 1600, 1630, 1680, 1900, 1950, so that there's not so much, um, it's not so loaded with what it's saying.
Julian or Gregorian calendar. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Dory?
And just for my own edification, we're now just not really touching this tab at all. Is that right? Because
Yeah,
so we don't have to stress.
The
Um,
preview of phase 2.
yeah.
and one thing that perhaps we can think about, and this is just a half-baked thought. I do think we could incorporate the neighborhood column into the main spreadsheet, the archive spreadsheet, perhaps.
I agree.
But we may also want to add an option that's like just Greater Boston, or Boston as a whole, because there will be collections that um that don't touch a single neighborhood, or something like that, like the City of Boston archives. I mean, I don't know.
I think that's a great idea.
Agree.
Should we do town-wide for the kind of collective city, or should we do something else?
Citywide is normally,
Citywide?
yeah.
Does everyone like that idea? Does anyone hate that idea? Okay. All right. So should we just replace column C title right now with nope.
And I
Why
can
do we have 2 C's? What am I looking at here?
Oh, this is the wrong one. Sorry, guys.
Okay, I was like, what's going on? I'm confused.
Yeah, and so that was gonna be my next point. Maybe we should go through these sheets and see what we don't need and what we do. So I guess I'll just put it here, make sure that we wanna do that. And we're saying to get rid of topics and themes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'll put it here then. Neighborhood. Great.
And Dory, are you accessing this tab specifically for the VPL thing?
Say that one more time, please.
So are you going to be using this tab specifically for populating the BPL?
Yes, I will. I haven't yet decided if I'll at some point I will simply make a copy of it, or use this exact one, but this would be the data.
So we should really prioritize this tab for anything that we would like to ultimately go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So then I added for our original conversation, like BPS units of study. And then I made a separate archive sheet for BPS because I didn't want to mess with this one. So if you guys think we should move away from that, I can delete those.
I wouldn't get rid of it. We just don't need to use it, but I think this is honestly a really cool thing to have. So I would personally just leave it.
Right. This is just a duplicate of what we have now. So we could delete that one, but
In that case, yeah.
the units of study I'll keep. It's an interesting way to see what they're looking at.
Yeah.
8th grade, I was locked out of, so.
I was like, what do you have against 8th grade?
Yeah, no, nothing. They literally just gave me access. So. And then we also have the historic buildings data dump, and the BLC petitions, which has all of these places. And we have a known gaps thing. So what do you guys want to just keep that as is, or do you want to clean that up? Because it's fine to keep, but maybe, in terms of presentation, we can talk about that if you guys want.
I think if we wanted to, create some quick wins, we put this guy up, and then I think, Joe, where you were talking about the next priority being a map. I mean, it depends on where we put the map, and maybe we can reach out to our Leventhal colleagues about that. Where would they put it? Because some of the things that are data dumps in here are already mapped. Right. So, historic buildings data dump came directly from Wikipedia. So, so maybe if we start with, I don't know, mapping the archives that have addresses, mapping the things that already have the institutions that already have, that would sort of get to that idea. I don't know. That's just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good point.
At this point, I don't know if this spreadsheet will be a visible public document, because I think that with the BPL clearinghouse and the map that Leventhal is going to be helping create, those would be the two products, I
Yeah,
believe. And this is more of like a working document for us to feed into those things, unless that's something that people want to see differently. Because I think even if we had a website for the Commemoration Commission, we can actually post both the BPL page and the map in
yeah,
that.
absolutely. Hmm. We can
Yep.
write
So, yeah.
article and have it both and be there together. And I need to check in with Ian at the Leventhal Map Center because I don't know, it's things happen, but I think that the project that we started with initially isn't working. And I think we kind of came to that conclusion, like us in this group, pretty quickly. Just because those history houses, a lot of them are privately owned, and therefore it's gonna be difficult to use them as like a resource for that mapping. And it was for BPS mapping so that, people could quickly look into it. But I wonder if I check in with Ian and say we could still include like BPS, BPL, and also these archive sources so that people can, you know, see where they are in relation to one another. Um, and this can also be added into the map pretty easily.
I mean, there's already 79 addresses. We'd be able to,
Hmm.
and I'm sure that there's a data set out there that Leventhal can get for the school buildings and the
Oh yeah, it already exists.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
think we just hand them this tab and say put that on the map too, and that'll be a pretty quick project, hopefully for them.
Yeah. The only thing is that actually that ends up working because the concept was to already put a picture of the place if there is one and a little description um of the institution or the history holder. So it might actually end up working really well. We just also have to put the longitude and the latitude, which is fine.
Yeah,
Which is fine. But yeah.
and see if chat can figure out how to turn column C into a latitude longitude for us.
Yeah.
Cool. Bef Before we pivot off of this thing, because I think we've gone through all the list of things. I'm starting a list of action items, so we'll come back to that. Do we want to talk about the traveling trunks? So I think that was the only other thing that we had talked about that we wanted to cover, the revised kind of whatever the heck it's called, agenda.
Well, I can say that we have the papers of the Roxbury Historical Society here at Northeastern, and as part of the collection was a trunk, which was made out of Roxbury pudding stone. So it's like 8 million pounds
I was gonna
that
say
they
how.
used to bring around to the schools. And it's an interesting artifact. So, I mean, it's certainly something that has been done before by various different people. I don't know about a physical trunk as much as, a digital trunk is
Hmm.
sort of what we might want to consider in this, every BPS kid has a laptop
Hmm.
zone. Especially coupled with you can physically go to these other places that we've just provided access to, where they can, spend some time showing you actual physical archival material. So that's just IMO.
So if we're
Yeah.
talking about traveling trunks, what would our goal be?
I'm gonna stop sharing this really quickly, so that we can talk about this.
Yeah.
I agree with the digital trunks idea. In terms of goal, that's a good question. For providing a resource for a historic topic, we want to ask if we want to do it by theme, if we want to do it just purely based on what each institution has. Um, and I guess those are the starting points. If it should be by theme, if it should be by institution, if we should consider grades when we do this, if we should align it to their units of study.
Can I ask a broader question? Are we talking about trunks that already exist that we're
Both,
trying to figure out how to organize by that sort of way, or are we talking about trunks that ought to exist, or both?
I think both.
Okay.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't want to tote around the Roxbury pudding stone trunk. It's probably a little out of date, considering it was used in the 80s.
I don't honestly know enough about the topic to have an opinion.
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah, I tend to think kids get enough online stuff. And so I kind of favor giving them actual stuff. I agree, Jordan. I don't think you should be the one toting around pudding stone, but actual tactile things. And I think different institutions kind of know what they have. And lots of institutions have done this. I remember the Children's Museum had a big program with trunks, and we saw the American Revolution the stuff. So but again, this is something we might not be the ones who know. I mean, you have the advantage of having this trunk at Northeastern where you can see what they were doing in the 80s. But it's really a good idea to connect a lot of these places. It might be an institution that does this, or it might be a historical society. But I think having something like this that they can get kids to see what's in their neighborhood historical society, or what's in the library, or what's in one of these archives. That's really the thing. I think it's the hook. It's not going to be, this is going to be the thing that is going to forever be the last word on X, but it's just a way of getting them excited about something that is in the neighborhood or in the city, and how much more you can learn. So I guess what I'm saying in a long-winded way is, let's not overthink this, but just start packing a few trunks with stuff and see what happens.
I completely agree with you, Bob, about this. Like, we've been doing preservation facsimiles. I mean, they're just like literally from an old printer that we bring around to various different, we'll prepare them and then we'll bring them around to various different things.
Yeah.
And that's been really fun because, I mean, you show somebody the like memo that started Metco, and
Wow.
it's super inspirational, and it's literally like something that costs 15 cents because you printed it off on your regular printer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that, thinking about some sort of program where preservation facsimiles can be per topic,
Yeah.
regardless of whether or not it's in an actual archival box, or in a trunk or whatever, something we should definitely think about.
Okay.
I'm an advisor on the Hacking the Archive project, which is Caroline Crockett at MIT's.
Mm-hmm.
And they call what basically the same theme, they call them hack packs. And so basically they're electronic, but they're researching one particular topic, and here's all of the historical references that you need to have. I prefer for them to be in paper just because I think it's easier for people to be inspired by things. But yeah, it's the same sort of concept of like adding the history into the conversation.
Yeah.
Just FYI, I put a neighborhood newspapers placeholder in the as a tab in the spreadsheet.
Okay.
Which I know that BPL, Dory, doesn't one of your colleagues have a really great LibGuide on that?
Yes, I can drum that up. Yeah.
Is that inclusive of stuff like the NACOB's newspaper journal, that kind of thing? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, recently, because the BPL and Digital Commonwealth have been doing a whole bunch of scans of newspaper, and instead of having them in paywalled resources, they've been putting them into newspapers. The Library of Congress one, whatever that one was. And so, a lot of them are really available, and we've been doing sort of more modern newspapers in collaboration with the BPL as well.
I just dropped the newspaper's LibGuide in the chat, and I just learned that there's a Boston journalism trail. So.
Can we have a collections type that's objects?
Yeah.
Because my whole program's under other, and I was like, hey.
I noted that, like, I don't
I
like
thought that was
other.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, I
is
got a
objects. Oh, sorry, Joe, I just spoke over you.
no, you go.
Is objects what the term that feels best to you, or is there another?
I think that's probably the safest word to use. I'm just also thinking about places like the Children's Museum and the Museum of Science that have both archive, like paper archives, and really important like object collections too. That could be a good way to kind of be more inclusive of the object-based history.
I mean, we have the luxury of being able to use a phrase, so we could say like objects and artifacts or something like that, if that would feel good. But I'll defer to you because you know objects better than I know objects.
Either would work. I think whatever folks would understand the best, which is just like it ain't a paper. But then things like, Mass Historical Society for sure would be inclusive of objects because there's quite a few amazing, and I'm sure many of these collections will also be object based as well. But anyway, sorry, I derailed that conversation. That was actually about something else.
I'm sorry, Joe, that was probably my fault.
No, I was just scrolling up and I was like, wait a second.
We could also just give you archaeology as a whole topic.
No. We're a means to an end. We're not our own thing.
3D.
I mean, there is a lot of like 3D scans that I think are going to eventually become part of this, but I think object artifact would still cover that pretty well.
Okay. I've added it.
All right. Are we still on trunks?
I don't think so.
Okay. Should we go over action items and then wrap? Okay. I have on my list. Dory is going to check into BPL to see if there's any branch-based archives that we should be aware of to note. I have Hennessy is going to use the columns to create a form and then begin distributing. And Hennessy, let me know if you need help with that. And then we are going to add to the and I don't know who we is. That it could be a lowercase w, uppercase w, or a royal we. Are going to add neighborhoods and citywide to the column drop downs for the main archives tab. And that's all I have for the action items. Although one of mine is going to be learn more about trunks because I don't get it. So I'm gonna learn more about it. I don't doubt that they're incredibly helpful, but I just don't even have a visual for it. I'm taking it very literally, and that's actually what it is. And I'm trying to think about it more abstractly than that.
I think I only just had it in my memory, add the main trails into the
Oh,
resource.
and I think I added the ones that I could type fast enough to get Freedom Trail, Immigrant History, Black History, Women's History, and then there was a discussion of innovation. I think there was a journalism one that was mentioned. Do we need to add that one too?
I will check the trails that are in this book that I have just to see which ones came out of it and then check which ones of those are still running.
So I
Because
just added and
anecdotally, about 20 years ago, Bob Krim was creating a maritime trail, literary trail, other trails, and had a lot of grand ideas. I remember Sean Hennessy, who worked for the Park Service, came to one of our meetings with a stack of brochures from other trails people had started in Boston over the previous 20 years. So, yeah, I'm sure if we start looking, we're going to find a lot. And so Joe will have to type a lot faster.
I also added in there because I noticed that they were both missing. Boston's Children's Museum and Boston Museum of Science were not on our list, and I just put them in there on the column A just to make sure we could add the more other information later. But if there's other ones like that, like the Boston Children's Museum and the Boston Museum of Science that are a little bit more gray area as far as whether they're archives or collections or whatever, then we should consider throwing them in there if you can do that, if you come up with one while we're living our lives independently. Anything else that we want to add to the to-do list? Okay, that's plenty. Hennessy, you
Um,
don't have anything else to do, right?
no, I just had a question about the adding the archives, the trails. Um, is that supposed to be on the, do we want to do that on a separate sheet or I'm just trying to see how we would incorporate that because every row is like part of one thing. And the trails are separate.
Could we ask BPL, no, can we ask Leventhal if they can do points and lines?
Yes. At this point, you know, 11th on Map Center might say you guys are asking too much of us. That's okay. We also have some GIS.
It's already in a spreadsheet. It's not too much to
No,
upload
it's
a
not.
CSV.
Not at all. It would just the little connecting lines might be, but we'll
That,
figure it out.
yeah, that might be.
And Hennessy, I think if I was interpreting your question correctly, I think interfiling the trails just on that archives tab would be perfectly fine. So that spreadsheet is just a one-stop shop.
I see. Okay. So do you guys want to add trails as a collection type too?
I was just gonna suggest that we
Yes.
need to
Okay, yeah.
codify objects, artifacts in the collections type and add trail.
Okay.